Hey, it's George Fourie. Welcome to the Martial Arts Media Business Podcast. So today I have a special guest with me, Edward Carr from New Hampshire in the United States. And so Edward owns two locations, Tokyo Joe Studios and Team Link MMA, both at the same actual location in the same facility on two separate floors. So we chat a bit about that divide and also how he's built a thriving business, 320, 30 odd plus students, mostly on word of mouth. And look, always when someone says word of mouth, I'm always curious because it always means there's a strong program, a strong product, and much more to it, right? And so we chat a lot about things that they've done in the community, their community promotions, also his book against anti-bullying that positions him as an authority, and all this, how it helped them thrive through the pandemic and almost not losing any students after being locked down for a full year. So we're going to jump into that. If you are new to the podcast, do check out on this page, martialartsmedia.com/126, depending where you're listening or watching. And be sure to download our ebook, The Ultimate Facebook Guide for Martial Arts Schools. That'll help you create your next winning ad campaign. And of course, wherever you're listening or watching, make sure you hit that subscribe button that you get notified when we release our next episode. All right, let's get into it. So Edward, over the last couple of months or just in general, what's been the top marketing strategy and lead generator for you?
It would be a lot of word of mouth, and online. Some online advertising definitely helped out, but the word of mouth has been incredible with all the students promoting, the school, and me being involved in the schools a lot also has helped out quite a bit. Just like I said, just promoting and having fun and going from there. And just letting the kids know, letting everyone know, what we're doing, what we're about, promoting the safety. Letting them know, like, even through the pandemic, people are still nervous, having all the safety stations everywhere and all that, just making everyone feel comfortable, and then having them go out and telling all their friends this is a place to go to exercise and have fun and, have your kids learn.
So if you've got great word of mouth, it's always a sign that you've got a great product, right? And great training and great program. But other than that, how do you feel you kind of orchestrate a lot of word of mouth, and what do you think escalates it?
Every time someone competes or does something, well, we've had a few big name fighters, fight for us. That always brings in a lot of students. People see it, they watch it on UFC Fight Pass. They go from there. We've had a lot of kids, Muay Thai tournaments and grappling tournaments and karate tournaments. They're starting to do them again, and that's always been great. Kids win a medal or a trophy, they're all happy. They tell their friends. And that's the type of word of mouth stuff that's happening. I wrote a book, and it was on bullying, and I got that involved into the schools. So me being involved in the schools and helping out and talking to the children, about bullying and this and that's also been huge. So it's a good word of mouth, thing, for me, to do all that. Like I said, there's been a little bit of online, stuff. I've done some, contests here and there, for everything, get the students involved, and just trying to work it, make it a grind.
What's the book called?
Lift Them Up.
And it's available on Amazon?
Yeah, it's available on Amazon. Yeah, Amazon Books. It's called Lift Them Up, and empower, how to make an empowering lifestyle. It just doesn't deal with this typical bullying. It deals with cyberbullying. It goes through the whole. Everyone thinks bullying, you just pick on someone. But, a lot of people don't realize there's a whole cyberbullying, internet bullying, texting bullying, all that. There's so much out there that people don't understand or realize. So, it's done well. I sold like 400 or 500 books, so I can't complain.
That's perfect. Well, I hope you sell 4,000 and 5,000 more after we do this podcast, right?
Absolutely.
So, if you don't mind sharing a little bit of insight, because it's a whole different planet, just like you're saying, it used to be bullying face to face. But, if I look at kids today, I think they're dealing with this whole different form of bullying it's pretty intense. And I don't know, I sometimes wonder how kids have actually got to deal with that, right? If there's especially if there's a group of people that are bullying you, or doing cyber attacks and just being nasty kids. What's your
Yeah,
advice
not
to kids and how to deal with that?
communication. A lot of kids tend to hide things, and I have a lot of kids that feel very comfortable coming to talk to me, not only their own parents or teachers, because they're afraid or scared. And it's just communication. I'm trying to, when I talk to them, I want them to feel comfortable. I want them to realize it's okay to talk to the teachers. It's okay to talk to your parents, especially your parents. Let them know what's going on. Too many kids out there just bottle it up. And unfortunately, bad things do happen. And, a lot of times they'll bottle that up and hold that negative energy inside, and they explode, and something negative can happen off of that. And that's the whole key, is communication, letting them know, that people are out there that care, these people in these positions care for them and want the best for them and want to help them out.
And so is that something you do on the mats, like mat chats and things like that?
Yeah, we talk a lot about that, on the mats. At the end of every class, I usually have like a little, 2 to 3 minute mat chat with them. And we're always talking about bullying, certain situations, and just how to train, how to deal with it, how to use your words first. Everyone thinks, a lot of kids think too, how to deal with things. They don't understand either. I got to make them aware. Like, they think, okay, I know karate and martial arts, I'm just going to go beat the bully up. That's not what it's all about. Trying to get them to realize, to be able to talk to them, try and make them be their friends or walk away. If there is a self-defense situation there, then of course, deal with it in the proper way. But definitely learn how to use your words first and your brain. I always tell them, use your brain first, be smart.
That's awesome. Cool. So talking about online, moving through the pandemic, and you mentioned earlier that you managed to maintain almost your full student base. How long were you locked down for? Just curious.
About a year.
Wow.
It was about a good year. And you weren't allowed to have any. I could do one-on-one classes. Like, I had a couple people, that I would make sure at 12 o'clock they could come in. It was just them. No one else could be around. I'd have to give a half hour's worth of time in between so I could clean and sanitize, and they could have another private. But that was it. No group classes. I could do family classes, but I'd have to do them outside. So thank goodness a lot of this was during the summer. So it worked out pretty good.
Yeah.
So I do a lot of group classes, with families outside in the parking lot, which another way, which pretty good advertising too, because then people driving by seeing us working out and exercising and doing something. So it was good advertising in that way. So, it was rough, but it was a learning experience for me, because trying to develop a system to keep everyone happy on Zoom. I've never taught. I mean, I've done a lot of seminars and this and that, but I've never taught on Zoom. Pretty much 8 hours a day, standing in front of a camera trying to teach forms. Or trying to teach a kickboxing combination and make sure they got proper footwork. It was a learning experience for me too. So, but it worked and kept everyone happy. And like I said, we just always have a contest. I always had something going on just to keep them, feeling good about themselves.
What do you think you've taken from that?
It's made me definitely a better instructor off of that. It definitely opened up my eyes a little bit. I definitely became a better. It just made me practice a little. We kind of get into I don't want to say a rut in a bad way, but we get in a rut in our daily routine of coming into the school, 4 o'clock class, 5 o'clock class, 6 o'clock class. And what it made me do is step out of the box a little bit. I hadn't done that for a while because I got a successful school. I'm happy. I'm always willing to grow, do what it takes. But I was, doing well. So I was like, okay. But this made me step out of the box a little bit, made me realize, okay, start training. You got to start training. You got to start using your mind, come up with these ideas, make these kids happy. Let these kids know you care. Let the parents know you care. Be BJJ MMA, make them happy, make sure, and be a coach. And so it made me step out of the box and become a better person for sure.
Were there any specific obstacles that you faced with the kids having to show up online and getting involved and engaging?
Yeah, it was interesting because I'd have to mute a lot of stuff. Like, they could hear me, but I couldn't hear them because, we'd have 30, 40 people online sometimes. You can't, everyone, they're still at home, so they still have their home lives. So you have dogs in the background or brothers and sisters poking their brothers online. And there's just, yeah. So at times it was a horror show. It was like, whoa, what's going on? But I mean, that was the biggest obstacle. The biggest thing was just like, trying to overcome all that at first. But once, after a week or so, it smoothed out pretty well, and it wasn't really that bad. Trying to engage them to let them know they could do martial arts on the computer, not just play video games, was rough. Because I would have some students that would blank the screen but forget to mute it, and I could hear them playing video games in the background. So then the parents would ask me how they're doing. I'm like, I don't know. You need to ask him. He's been playing video games. So stuff like that would happen on and off. But overall, it was definitely tough keeping them engaged because they're staring at a computer screen. Even my own daughter would do karate in her bedroom, and I'd have to tell her stop jumping on the bed. Like, listen, you're in class. Stop jumping on the bed. I was trying to keep them engaged was definitely a learning experience. That's for sure.
So what did you do to have that constant state change? Because I mean, you can't let them do one thing too long to get in. Yeah, boredom kicks in.
I just constantly kept them moving as much as I could. Sometimes in a normal class, you take your time, you go over forms more. There's more of a pause, more of a slow. You couldn't do that online. I almost taught it like a cardio kickboxing class, where I just kept moving and moving and moving and moving and moving. Classes are only 30 minutes long, but it was like, just keep them moving. Don't give them that time to stop. Don't give them that time to think. We would do a form to warm up, and right from our form, we'd go right into some kicking and some punching, and then we'd go into some, self-defense techniques, and I'd make it a game and just keep them moving so they didn't have that time to go look around or see who's playing outside or stuff like that.
Gotcha. And then jiu-jitsu, and how did you handle the BJJ side and the adults and so forth?
That was the tough part. Like teaching Thai kickboxing or MMA wasn't so bad because you could teach them some combinations, some sprawls, double legs. You can teach transitions and stuff. That was okay. But the BJJ was tough. Like I had everyone make their own dummy, grappling dummy, or they could buy one for me, and whoever made the best dummy won a free gi, stuff like that. So we had like 15 people make their own grappling dummies. So that's part of getting them involved and engaged. A few people bought some off of me. And then basically it was just teaching them transitions and moves and talking to them about, the connecting points. Always have points of control and hip pressure and where your hips should be, where your shoulders should be, where your grip should be. And it was more of a, just teaching the technical side of things. And there were some drills out there you could do, switching back and forth, knee on belly, switching, going into mount, going to, back to knee on belly to arm bars, north, south, all that. You could do all that stuff too. But that was actually trying to teach them actual moves was, definitely interesting.
It's something that obviously working with school owners, we've got a group we call partners, and we've got few school owners from around the world, but different styles. And so it's always conversations that have come up, obviously, with the pandemic. And interesting as well, because everyone was always at a different stage of, we're going into lockdown, we're coming out, what do we do? But it was a good opportunity to cross-pollinate ideas. But we had one of our members, Carl, just talk about, they were just in a 2-month lockdown in New Zealand, and 100% jiu-jitsu school, and managed to keep all his students going, but the main focus was just movement. Movement and
100%.
And keeping the community going. So, a big thing that we've spoken about was the community, the content, and then the coaching. So how do you do those things? How do you create the community going? I mean, that's the big thing. And how do you keep the coaching going? And we came up with some creative ideas, right? So he bought the John Danaher set, and then every day he would just go through a video, or they would post a clip from an instruction from someone else, and then they would study it and they would analyze it. So they'll use even someone else's content, but then create the conversation around it to keep the community.
Yeah, we did the same thing. We actually one day myself would do a jiu-jitsu video with my my student. I've known him forever, and it was him and I. We'd do a jiu-jitsu video. Then the next day we'd use a video or something from someone else. We use a lot of John Danaher, Gordon Ryan, stuff like that. And then the next day I would do like a karate video for everyone. And then the next day my student would do a kickboxing MMA video for them. So every day we were putting out a video for the students also to give them some content to study. So not only could you do classes, I would send these videos and post them to everyone, and they could go at home and practice that same combinations, 3 or 4 5 different ways on how to do an overhand right, do how to do 2-pin the proper way, a form, and so that worked out pretty well too.
Sounds good. So give us a bit of a background about your school and your location. And I know you've got a massive facility and you've got 2 floors, and just give us a bit of an overview on the infrastructure and how things operate.
I've been here since 1999. I've always done martial arts since I was 14, and I just turned 50, so I've been doing it for a while. I just one day woke up and decided I didn't want to do my job anymore and said, I'm going to open up a school. Let's try it.
How long ago was this?
1999. Yeah. And so I found a location, and at first we only had about 2,000 square feet. But I like this location because it always had the opportunity to grow. So I just started off with traditional karate. I always studied grappling and wrestling on my own on the side, and I'd already had a couple fights on the side, but I didn't really promote that too much. Yeah. And then as we grew fast. First 6 months, we grew pretty quick. So I got to open up another 1,400 square feet or so in the back, and we used that room for a while. And then I always had the basement downstairs, and it's a giant, like two bay garage, basement. And one day my landlord's like, if you want the space, I'll charge you this much for it, and just take it over and do what you want. You do the work, I'll give it to you cheap, and it's cheap. And I was like, all right. So I did all the work, and then like I said, we got 2 open floors upstairs. Bathrooms, office, all that stuff. Downstairs, there's a couple different ways you can go in. It's got showers, couple locker rooms downstairs, a bag room. It's got a ring, a cage, and probably about a 1,800 square foot weight room too. So I did the weight room originally for the parents. A lot of parents don't have time to go to the gym, so I allowed the parents for free at first to, while their kids are in class, they're going to see us run on the treadmill, lift some weights, or do something. That way they wouldn't have to worry about their kids. They knew they're doing class. But that took off, and that was taking off pretty good. So now I hired a personal trainer, so he comes in, he does personal classes, for the parents, and, it's a little bit extra income off of that and stuff like that. And, they schedule privates, go to kids. A lot of them, they'll come down here and work with them during their kids' class and get in shape. So, we got a little bit of everything. Kids martial, all the kids' classes are first. We got kids BJJ, kids Muay Thai, kids Kempo Karate, and then usually at nighttime it's depending on the day, it's either adult Muay Thai, adult MMA, adult BJJ, gi or no gi on the day, and then cardio kickboxing too. And then we do stuff on the weekends. Saturday's a full day of classes. Sunday is kind of my day. I invite either the black belts in, and we do like a black belt workout, or I'll just invite some fighters in and we'll just train. So it's like a training day on Sundays for us. So, it's a full-time job. Like I said, it's like 8,000 square feet, full-time job. I have about maybe now 330 students. And yeah, it has its moments, but, I've been blessed throughout this whole pandemic, so I can't complain.
That's cool. And so you've got 2 names, right? Tokyo Joe's.
Yes.
It's Tokyo Joe Studios and Team Link MMA.
Yep.
Curious on 2 names, but also Tokyo Joe's.
Well, my instructor, who was 14, was playing football, and he was into karate. And he's from East Boston, and he was doing some karate moves in football practice, and they just named him Tokyo Joe. That was his nickname. So as he progressed and opened up his own school, he met me at that was always his nickname. He called it Tokyo Joe Studios. He named it after his nickname. And then I was at the Canadian Open as a karate tournament, and he had met me, and he said, "Hey, you fought really well. Why don't you come train with me?" And he goes, I'm like, "All right." And he was close by, so I started training with him and, competing under him, in all these karate tournaments all over the place. Also got a chance to train with like Jody Tension and Reggie Perry, who were part of the Team Paul Mitchell, who are, world champions too. So opened up to my doors and ideas. And then one day he's like, you should think about opening up a school. You're a great instructor, you're a great motivator, you're a good leader. And I didn't really put much thought into it. And then he kept bugging me. And then one day I'm doing my job, construction. I was doing construction, driving some equipment. And I'm like, you know what? Yeah, it's time. I don't feel like doing this. So I went into the office and gave my notice and went back to him and said, I guess we'll open up a school. Let's try it. So that was the karate side of things.
Right.
I'd always done MMA on the side. I was part of Militich Fighting Systems with Pat Militich. And when I trained there with them, it was, they had 3 out of the 5 UFC champions. It was one of the best gyms around. We did a lot of fighting and training there. But as they all got older and branched off, opened up their own gyms, and everything kind of disbanded, I was just left with like no direction in my BJJ program. I was only a purple belt at the time, and really didn't know how to what to do. So like I said, Marco Alvin, Gabriel Gonzaga, and Alexander Moreno all came to me one day because I had trained with them, helped them out with fights, and worked with them. And they're like, "Why don't you just join us? It would be a great marketing thing for your BJJ program." It's a little confusing for some people, but once they get in here, they realize I kind of keep it separate, and I like keeping it separate because I like the younger kids. I think, yeah, we do BJJ. We still teach a little bit of focus and concentration in that class, like a karate thing. I like them to learn the focus and concentration side of things. They don't need to necessarily see all the hard work and training that goes into MMA. Plus, parents, sometimes they get the wrong opinion. They see the fights on TV and they think that's what it's all about. And I don't want to give the parents that impression. So that's why I have an upstairs and downstairs and stuff. But it's actually become a great tool because parents realize all the hard work and all the dedication that goes into that. That's their martial art. That's their form. While the kids are learning their stuff, they see the adults or the teenagers doing this, and they realize there's a lot of hard work if it's taught the right way. So now, like whenever we have someone fight, it's on Fight Pass. I got to open up the school, and we'll have a school full of people watching it on the TV. You know what I mean? It becomes a school party, so it brings them all together. Like you said, you're trying to create a good, good atmosphere, for everyone, good environment, and it brings them all together to watch the fights and stuff like that. So it's kind of cool.
Perfect, because that was going to be my next question. How do you balance the two cultures? Do you find that they divided or they sort of come together?
It's actually come together. At first, it was pretty divided. When at first the sport was starting to grow, it was pretty divided. People thought, brutality, this, that, and, and you could definitely understand that. But over the years, as time has gone on, people see it. They've seen the fights, pants of ass. We've, like I said, they've, they got, a lot of kids would do karate competitions, so then, now they have kids Muay Thai, very controlled, but kids Muay Thai. And then, they got kids BJJ. So because of all these classes that we have, kids getting involved in all these other smaller competitions, the parents are wanting to see what the adults and teens are doing and how that's evolved. So it's actually brought it all kind of together, and everyone's, it's pretty cool to see everyone support, everyone get together and support everyone and have fun too. You have a lot of parents that will just come down on Wednesday nights, sparring night. They'll just come down and just watch. They'll bring their, 10-year-old kid and, is it sparring on Wednesday? Yeah. Can we come on? Yeah, come on in. They have a whole group that will just sit on the side and just watch. This is awesome, because they get a chance to see, kicks, punches and stuff and blocks and wrestling. They into actual, you get a lot of kids that don't compete. We don't force them to compete. If you want to compete, we can get them ready. But it gets to see them, put it in practical use kind of, so they like watching it.
Perfect. So just to change gears a little bit back to the marketing aspect, you got a successful school, 300 plus students. You mentioned word of mouth is good. What else contributes to the growth?
Community involvement. like I said, but everything's changing now. The whole world's changing. I mean, you know what I mean. When I first opened up, you had to advertise in the yellow pages. Big giant ads in the yellow pages. That was a thing. You had who had the biggest ad. The best looking ad in the yellow pages. Then as time went on,
and your
what's
name's got
that?
to start with, and your name's got to start with A, right? So that you're like
Yeah,
at the
exactly,
front of the book.
exactly. Yeah, and then as time went on, internet became more. It was like websites were huge. Websites are still very important, and they're still a useful tool. But that was important. Then now social media. The whole advertising world has changed so much over the 20+ years. So now I just try and stay on top of things. I do a lot of social media. I do a lot of posting. I do a lot of contests, within the schools. On that, I do a lot of, like I said, I'm involved in the community, the schools, certain fairs, certain, town fairs, this and that. Those are all advertising avenues for me. When they have town fairs, I do a community fair myself I haven't done it the last couple of years because of the pandemic, but I rent all kinds of bouncy houses, obstacle courses, this and that, dunk tanks. And at the end of every summer, I do like a community thing. Everyone's welcome. We'll do a little open house, some demonstrations, have a huge cookout for everyone. And, it's just advertising like that is big. I'm always looking though, like, I know right now, I'm looking to step up on the digital side of things, pick up the digital side of things and marketing some online, make my online presence a little bit better is my goal for this year.
Perfect. So I love the aspect of community. I mean, I think that's just gold, right? Because being involved in the community, it makes you stand out. It also builds your authority, way behind just the martial arts you offer. But you mentioning things are changing. What are you noticing that's changing the most, especially with just the world and online, that's impacting your marketing the most?
Really, it's just the online presence. Having a great online presence is very important now. Before it wasn't, but now, you see a lot of the biggest schools, you see ads all the time, you see this all the time. And, these schools aren't spending that amount of money if it's not working. There's certain things out there, and I know these school owners very well. And I know that they're not putting these ads out there if it's not working. And I just noticed a huge online presence and how important it is. It's becoming, you know what I mean? And, before you had a whole script on the phone. Very rarely do I get phone calls now. Now it's all emails. Or you sometimes even text messages. Oh, my friend gave me your number. My son's in it. It's emails, it's text messages. It's all online. You've been to your website, you've been to your Facebook page. What about this? So just the online presence is becoming very important, and just making sure, your name's out there, and making sure, you're promoting your product or whatever it may be, your services out there is what I think is the best, is what's changing the most. Before, you're right. Fortunately, I have a great word of mouth, and that's great. It means, like you said, you get a great service, you got great products, you got that. But, you can always do better. So I definitely want to do the online present thing.
I think school owners like yourself, where you benefit is you've built this whole foundation without that. Fine-tuned the product, the delivery, the programs, the community aspect. When you elevate your online presence, it's really just fuel on the fire because you've got all the foundations right.
Yeah.
I mean, we like to really, especially in the work that we do with school owners, we're really just trying to think of the simplicity of it. And like you were saying, with people don't really call anymore. So when you look at that, it's not, the message is still the same. It's just the medium of communication is
Exactly.
different. So people, you got to ask permission before you call.
Yeah.
The world's just gotten like that. I always text someone and say, hey, is it okay to call you? It's like, thought you would just pick up the phone, right? But
exactly.
Messenger and Messenger. I mean, we find ads to Messenger is still the best thing ever, because if, of course, you've got the process to sign people up and work through the process, there's so many things that we are seeing changing. And like you said, I mean, I'm a web developer from way back, and my first advice was always be just get the spanky awesome website and get it up on Google and you're good. Now I don't give that advice anymore. I would say, right, let's get your offer right, and let's get your ad up, let's get your message out there and find a simple way to follow up. And if you can get those things right, website's good to have for the people that will go Google and check you out. But I mean, you can build a big organization just without that.
Exactly.
The only thing that always scares me is the control factor of putting all your eggs into a basket like Facebook, and that's the one thing that drives your business. And if it's not there, well, I mean, I think it's still going to be there for a long time, right? But especially when you see things shuffle and people change to different platforms, it's good to be tabs and be a bit omnipresent in that way that you can do without the
exactly. I mean, it's definitely been interesting noticing the changes. That's for sure. Like you said, everything. I always tell everyone this. I've helped a few people open up schools, and I just, that's what I'm. Get your online presence going. Well, what about this ad? No, you don't need that ad. It's not like the old days. You don't need yellow pages. You don't need this. You don't need that. Get your online presence up and going. You need a website, of course. People still will visit it and go on. Make sure you have this in your website, and like you said, the right content in the website that's going to attract the people to go to it. The right ads, the right deals, and stuff like that. Online presence is definitely more important for sure.
So what's next for you, Edward? Like where you guys going? Are you opening up more locations?
I don't know if honestly what's next for me is I've been doing this for a long time. Has really been toying with the idea of doing another smaller location. I don't know if but before I've done that, I've been really trying to develop a good, strong, solid staff here. I'm one of the few instructors, like, I enjoy teaching. And, like, some instructors enjoy running their school, and then they have instructors teach for them. I like still being out on the floor, with the kids and teaching. I still like teaching MMA. I still like, teaching BJJ, people think I'm crazy, but I still teach up to 40 plus classes a week. And I love it, but I'm also 50 now. So now, I'm developing the staff and the know-how, of really developing, like, I got some really good fighters that still have a few years left in them, but know that, the end's coming. But unbelievable instructors. So I'm getting them involved, developing a really solid foundation in the BJJ group of instructors, working on getting them, I got some unbelievable teens, getting them involved in the karate side of things and showing them and teaching them. So that way, when that second location opportunity does come, I know that I'll be able to leave for the day and leave this place in good hands. So staff training and picking the right people to find out who want to be part of the team and making sure share the same vision. You know what I mean? And so that second location within. I got a goal. I set goals, but within a couple of years, I definitely want to have something up, a second one up and going. This school's all set. So that's really what I've been working on now.
Gotcha. And I guess lastly, what are you most excited about for the next couple of years?
Just growing. I love it. There's we had, already since January. I don't even know what's the date. The 7th. We've had. It's always the New Year rush, but we already had 14 new people sign up. So it's been great. I love getting the new people going. I love teaching. I just love growing and, just helping people out. I can't complain. I have a great job. And so, I mean, what's next is just to keep growing, keep having fun and keep sharing what I love to do. And, hopefully that second location will come in a few years and go from there.
Sounds good. Hey, Ed, thanks so much for jumping on. Being great to chat. And just the title of your book again?
Lift Them Up.
Lift Them Up.
Yeah, definitely on Amazon.com and Barnes & Noble's. It's also on Barnes & Noble's website too. So if they want to check it out, please check it out. It's a great book on bullying, all the different types of bullying that there are in the world today. So definitely check it out.
Yeah, perfect. We'll link it up in the show notes. So wherever you're watching or listening, it will be martialartsmedia.com/126. The number's 126. That'll take you there. And just lastly, any shout out you want to give, or any way that people can connect with you if you're open to that?
Yeah. You can always, we just talked about, you can always hit me up, of course, on my email at TokyoJoesHooksIt at Comcast.net. You can always hit me up on Facebook under Ed Carr, or you can visit the school webpage, Tokyo Joe Studios. At Instagram, I'm on Instagram at Tokyo Joe Studios, and on Twitter. So those are the best ways. Like I said, we're talking about social media and stuff. That's what people use. The best ways to hit me up, send me a message, ask me any questions. You can call the school, 603-641-3444 if you want. Ask me any questions you want. I'm always here and always willing to help.
Fantastic. Ed, thanks so much. I'll chat to you soon.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And thank you for having me.
You're welcome.